Yeah, man. Okay. Beto, Robert Francis Beto O'Rourke has now doubled and tripled down on his gun confiscation plan. So he was asked, by the way, the hat tip to the woman on this. What was her name? I think we have it in the screen. But this is a video from a local reporter getting Beto on the record saying, hey, what are you going to do when you implement your mandatory gun confiscation? Folks, I know I say this sometimes, and even I've made this mistake, but please stop referring to Beto's plan as a gun buyback. It is not a buyback. You cannot buy back what you never bought in the first place and don't own. My guns are not for sale, number one. Number two, I did not buy them from the government. I bought them from a free market manufacturer that manufactures quality firearms. I don't owe the government anything. A mandatory buyback is a confiscation program. Do not let the left monopolize the language. This is a confiscation program, period. You can't buy back what you don't own. So a reporter asked Beto, well, what are you going to do if people don't, sell you the guns back? Here was his answer.
No offense, could someone go to jail under this proposal?
I'd begin by saying that we expect our fellow Americans to follow the law. If they do not, there would be a fine imposed to compel them to follow the law. We've seen this implemented successfully in Australia, where you've seen a near 50% reduction in gun violence deaths in that country.
No, thank you. Fed the liar buzzer. That is not true. Captain Beto, that is not true. He's making that up. The Australia stuff, I'm going to get to that in a second, the Australia stuff. But on the first part, do you hear what he said? You're going to be fined. So fined what? I mean, how is that going to work? It's going to be... Now, ladies and gentlemen, there are tens of millions of AR-15 platform rifles in the country right now. Do you have any idea? I said this to Paula last night. We were chatting about this. Do you have any idea the complicated, dangerous logistics behind a mass confiscation of tens of millions of AR platforms across the country?
Ooh, daddy.
I'm not even going on how, because this is, folks, nobody's turning them in. There will be civil disobedience on a mass scale like I promise you have never seen before. I would estimate less than 5% of, and I'm being generous at 5%, less than 5% of the population is going to turn over their ARs. That is why they want universal background checks, Joe. The Democrats put two and two together. We discussed this on yesterday's show. The Democrats want universal background checks to keep a list, a registry. That's the registry they will cross-reference with IRS records or whatever, and they'll use the IRS to fine you if you have an AR and don't turn it in. Don't turn it in. Don't underestimate these people. That's the first part of his nonsense. He now wants to fine you, this clown, who's at, 4% in the polls. He keeps talking about, I heard this on Fox last night too, the effectiveness of the Australian National Firearms Register, where they confiscated people's firearms. It's called the NFA. Ladies and gentlemen, now we've discussed this on the show before, but sometimes topics tend to become evergreen, and now that this is creeping up again, and I'm hearing it in debates, I even heard a couple liberals on Fox talk about it the other day, the Australian gun confiscation did not do what Beto said and what liberals tell you it did. In the show notes today, which I can't recommend enough, please subscribe to my email list. Matt Palumbo's article. Now, he wrote this last year, November 2018. The truth about Australian gun control at Bongino.com. This is an excellent, excellent piece. He also covers this, I believe, in Debunk This, his book. Folks, number one, on the gun control topic from the piece on Australia. He says the smoking gun, pun intended, proving that Australia's disappearance and mass shootings. So just to be clear, the liberals want you to believe that mass shootings in Australia took a dramatic decline because they confiscated the guns. So Matt correctly says this decline is not due to gun control and that most of Australia's mass public shootings were committed with guns not banned by the gun confiscation, the NFA, and are still legal. In a study by criminologist Gary Kleck, he has the sources in there too, found that just 2 of Australia's mass shootings in the 18 years preceding the confiscation were committed by firearms banned by the NFA. So in other words, there are no laws in effect that could have possibly prevented all but 2 of Australia's mass shootings from happening again. The guns used in those shootings were largely not taken by the Australian gun confiscation. So saying the gun confiscation stopped the mass shootings that didn't confiscate those guns is pure idiocy. But Beto doesn't know that. Now, I started with the most nuanced point. Not a complicated one. You're all very bright. You'll figure that out. That's a bit of a nuanced point. Well, you're saying that you're making a causal inference. The cause of the decrease in Australia's mass shootings, you're saying the cause of it was a gun ban. The problem is the firearms used in those mass shootings were not banned by the actual law. So your causal inference is dopey. It's just a fabrication. The second point, before I get back to Matt's piece, I want to put, this is from the Sydney Morning Herald. Ladies and gentlemen, by Bianca Hall, March 27, 2019. This is in the show notes too. Ladies and gentlemen, this is one of those articles I strongly encourage you to screenshot and keep up on your phone for debating your liberal friends who cite Australia as successful models for gun control. Sydney Morning Herald. More guns in Australia now than before the Port Arthur massacre. New report. Folks, I don't know what else to tell you. If your assertion that the Australian gun confiscation led to X, the Australian gun confiscation led to Y, you fill in what that Y is. Less gun homicides, less mass shootings. And the reason I say the XY thing is not to, introduce Algebra 101 and make this overcomplicated. It's because every time I hear liberals debate and use Australia, the Y is different. You get what I'm saying, Joe? They'll say, X, the Australian gun control led to decreased violence, decreased shootings, decreased mass homicides, decreased mass shootings. The Y changes all the time. That's why I'm using variables here, because liberals will say make up anything. So the problem with their gun confiscation led to Y theory is that there are more guns now. So whatever the Y is, you're actually making the opposite point. If your point is gun confiscation led to less gun violence, your point is the opposite one because there are more guns now. So what you're saying is more guns. Here it is from the piece. The number of firearms in Australia is dramatically higher than before the Port Arthur massacre that killed 35 people, raising fears that the gun lobby's efforts to relax national restrictions are bearing fruit. There are more guns now. So whatever point you think you made, the point is that more guns equal. This is, by the way, I'm not making a causal inference. I'm using their logic. You're saying gun confiscation equals less gun homicides. I'm telling you by your own logic, if there are more guns now, that means more guns equals less gun crime. They're making X caused Y inferences that are not true. I'm telling you that the X, gun confiscation, there are more guns now. So if there's an equals in between those two things, whatever you're saying it equals is the exact opposite argument. Gun confiscation led to less crime. Well, there are more guns now. So you're saying more guns leads to less crime? That's not what I'm saying. How are you not saying that? There are more guns in Australia now. No, there aren't. Yes, there are. Do you not know the data? When I said this, I did an interview with 60 Minutes Australia. You all can find it on the internet if you want.
Remember
the
that.
guy here, they were nice people, but they were libs. There's no doubt about it. By our standards, liberal, overseas liberals means different things sometimes. And a traditional liberalism, of course, something totally different in America, too. The guy was stunned, the interviewer, when I told him that. He said, no, there aren't. There aren't more guns now in Australia. I said, sir, do you want to Google it? And I'm telling you, at the end of the interview, he said, I'm glad you told me that because I didn't know that either. I'm not making that up. I'm not revealing behind the scenes secrets to embarrass the guy. He told me after the interview he didn't know that. So whatever point you're making on Australia, it's the opposite one of what you think you're making. Finally, on Australia, going back to Matt's piece, debunking their entire thesis is this. So Matt asked, did gun violence really decline in Australia from the piece? Well, gun violence did fall like a rock in Australia following gun control. All right, you maybe say, oh my gosh, Dan, argument over. No. Now we do the hard thinking. This is where the liberals stop. Fell by roughly half in the 2 decades following it. And, Joe, it also happened to fall like a rock in America, too. Everything is relative. And Australia's gun violence decline post-gun control occurred at a time when crime was declining globally. A 2016, this is the kicker, a 2016 American Medical Association study, not some big conservative group, the AMA, folks, examined trends in firearm homicides and suicides before and after the adaptation of gun control in Australia from the 1996 confiscation, and found no evidence, let me repeat, no evidence of a statistically significant effect of gun control on the pre-existing downward trend of the firearm homicide rate.
Climate change.
Climate change was happening. You should put that on a t-shirt. Climate change was happening globally. Crime was going down. The climate change effect was going down. You making a causal. Again, I know, Libs, I'm sorry you have to think this through. Causation and correlation are different things. I use this example all the time. You see more head colds in the winter. It's not because cold weather causes head colds. It has nothing to do with it. Cold weather causes you to secrete more mucus, which is completely independent, which makes you do what? Rub your nose more, where you transfer rhinoviruses up your nose. Cold weather does not cause you to be sick. There is a correlation. Yes, these are completely different things. So the fact that Australia passed a gun confiscation measure, and after that gun confiscation measure, gun crime continued to go down, has nothing to do with cause, according to the AMA's own study. They were correlated. Why, Joe? Because as Joe said, climate change was happening around the globe. That's great, by the way. Was happening around the globe, and everywhere, gun control, gun confiscation or not, gun crime, suicides, homicides were going down. What was the cause? It wasn't the gun control, because there are more guns now.